Hello everyone, my name is Shayan Ghosh and I am a final year medical student from GMERS Medical College and Hospital Sola, which is in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. And I'm really thankful to Make Medical Easy for giving me this opportunity to teach and learn simultaneously on this platform YouTube, which has a very good reach. So I will be starting a series of GIT integrated and not only just one aspect like physiology anatomy but integrated. Okay, and in this series, the first topic for you guys is oral cavity. Okay, so let's get started. Let's summarize what we're going to learn today. Lips, oral cavity mucosa and inner cheeks, teeth and gums, tongue, palate, and muscles of mastication. The muscles of mastication part will be a very small part because that will be covered in a different topic, not in the bounds of this topic. But just because we're talking about mouth and oral cavity, talking about food and chewing, I'll just mention some points of muscles of mastication. The first part is lips. So why I've chosen lips first? Because when we eat food, the first thing our food encounters is the lip, and then it goes to the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and so lips are the first part, okay? And we're going from the anterior to the posterior part and then down. Lips are also called labia. Okay, so there are two lips. We humans have two lips, upper lip and the lower lip. It's very easy to understand. Both are joined laterally at the angle of mouth. This is the angle of mouth. Okay, and it's very easy to understand that they surround the opening of the mouth. So if you open your mouth, you're opening your lips. You will open the oral cavity. You will see the whole oral cavity proper. And if you close, you are closing the mouth. Okay, that's very easy to understand. The basic anatomy, lips and the surrounding area. So in this photo, in this diagram, I have tried to cover some of the surrounding parts which are not really, uh, you know, they're not important for digestion purpose or taking in food, but it's kind of important to understand the areas surrounding the lip. There are some terms you have to understand. So the first is very easy, upper lip and the lower lip. At the lateral side where the angle of mouth is, there's labial commissure from where the two lips are joined. Okay. There is vermilion zone. What is the vermilion zone? The pink part, the pink portion of your lip is called the vermilion zone. And where the vermilion zone ends on both the lips, it's called the vermilion border. Okay, so that's where the vermilion zone ends. There's something called philtrum. You all must have heard and learned about philtrum. Philtrum is very easy to understand. This depression, this cavity which connects the middle aspect of the upper lip to the septum of the nose. It's called the philtrum. And there's a line we can see in many people. I don't know if it's visible in my case, but there's a line which is called the nasolabial sulcus. It goes from the angle of mouth to the nose, to the lateral portion part of the nose, and it covers the cheek. So the cheek starts from here, the bulge part of the cheek. Then we have mental protuberance and labiomental groove. This is the labiomental groove, and this is the chin part, the mental protuberance, also called the mentum. The structural anatomy of the lip itself. From the superficial to the deep, we have skin, we have superficial fascia inside it, we have orbicularis oris muscle, which governs the actions of the lip, the opening and the closing, the mechanisms. Submucosa, which contains the mucous glands, very important for the oral cavity. We have mucous membrane, which we can see on the inside, the inner aspect of our mouth, the oral cavity. The blood, nerve, and the lymphatic supply. The arteries that supply the upper and the lower lip is superior labial artery and inferior labial artery respectively, which are the branches of facial artery. Okay, so you can see in this diagram how the superior labial artery and the inferior labial artery are coming and supplying the upper and the lower lip. I have written end-to-end anastomosis. What is end-to-end anastomosis? So if you look carefully, the facial nerve is coming from both the sides, so it's a bilateral approach of the facial nerve. So the it gives off superior labial artery and the inferior labial artery from both the sides. Okay, so it forms a close connection, and wherever two arteries make a connection, and it forms the anastomosis. So because it is from end to end, it's called end to end anastomosis. Okay. Vein, the facial vein, very easy. Lymphatic drainage. So the lower lip is supplied by two lymph nodes. Okay, and it differs on what area they drain. Okay, the central part of lower lip drains to the submental lymph node. The lateral part of the lower lip drains into the submandibular lymph node. Okay, and also the whole upper lip supplies to the submandibular lymph node. Okay, the nerve. Now this is a very important point because it involves trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal nerve has two divisions which we should discuss with regarding to lip: maxillary division and mandibular division. The maxillary division gives out infraorbital nerve, and it's the infraorbital nerve's labial branches go and supply the upper lip. Okay, and trigeminal nerve also gives mandibular division, which gives out mental nerve, and that supplies the lower lip. What are the functions? It's very easy to understand the functions, not a big deal. Closing and opening of the mouth, as I said. Hold and push food items. Okay, so I have written 3 points for hold and push food items because, when you're not using your teeth, you're still holding the food item with your lip to stabilize it. While using the teeth for chewing, you're also using the lip for stabilizing the food for the teeth to chew. And the very important function is while the voluntary phasing of swallowing. So when you're eating the food, when the actual thing is going on, the lips, if they're open, the food can fall out. So they close and push the food as well inside to promote better digestion while swallowing, the voluntary phase of swallowing. Let's discuss some clinical aspects. Okay. So the first point is abnormal color of lips, and it's a very important point because many signs on the lip based on the lips color, they can guide you towards a diagnosis. Okay, and some of them are very obvious. If the patient has pale lips, not the pink vermilion color, then it indicates severe anemia. Blue colored lips are very abnormal because usually they are red in color. So if they are blue in color, it indicates cyanosis, lack of oxygen in our blood, severe lack of oxygen in our blood. Lemon yellow tint. If you have a yellowish lemon yellow tint, it indicates that if the person has lemon yellow tint, it indicates jaundice. Carcinoma. Lip is a common site for carcinoma, and it occurs in 60 years of age or above. And the upper lip among both the lips is involved more, 93%. Okay. Mucosal cyst. Okay, what is that? It's a retention cyst. And it occurs very commonly. It's bluish, soft, and fluctuant. What is fluctuant? If you move it, it will move like that, and it's fluctuant. It's not very hard, not stiff. It may resolve on its own or will require surgical excision because cyst, any kind of benign tumor, they require surgical excision. So that was mucosal cyst, retention cyst. Okay. Ulcers, very common. Ulcers can be symptom of many diseases like syphilis, skin cancer, herpes simplex, not simplex, herpes simplex virus infection, erythema multiforme. In these diseases, you can see the formation of ulcers. There are some abnormal colored spots which we can observe in lips. Peutz-Jeghers syndrome, brown to black spots, multiple small and scattered. Okay, and in smokers, we can see freckles and irregular brownish area from where they hold the cigarettes. That area becomes brownish. And there's Kawasaki disease. So what is Kawasaki disease? Kawasaki disease usually happens in children who are either infants or up to 8 years old, below that. Dryness and cracking of the lips, reddening of the lining of the mouth. Okay, so there is dryness, there is cracking of the lips, reddening of the lining of the mouth. Cheilitis or cheilitis, inflammation of the lips. basic thing. It's itis in the end, so it's inflammation of the lips. And the most common occurrence of the presentation, the most common presentation of cheilitis is angular cheilitis. Okay. Causes, there could be trauma due to dentures, candida or staph aureus infection, or there could be deficiency of iron and vitamin B2. So up until now, what all we have discussed, these are all diseases which are the diseases I mentioned, or they require symptomatic treatment or removal of the substance that is causing the disease. Like in vitamin B2 and iron, it's a symptomatic treatment. Give them vitamin B2 and iron. Staph and candida, give them antibiotics. Dentures, remove the dentures. Okay. Microcelia. Okay, macrocelia, enlargement of lip mass. It's macrocelia, so enlargement of the lip. And the causes of this can be lymphangioma, hemangioma, and inflammatory conditions. So it's very simple to understand if you're not a first year student, but you have learned pathology. These things will be tuned in your head that, okay, enlargement, there could be edema, there could be inflammation, there could be any other hyperplasia of the cells. There could be lymphangioma or hemangioma, okay. Cleft lip. It's a very, very important and a common occurrence in the children, and it's a congenital. The disorder has a congenital origin. Okay, this could be due to developmental failure or the failure of fusion of arches. Okay, the pharyngeal arches which form the face, they're not fused or not developed properly, so they do not complete their growth. Cleft lip alone or associated with the cleft palate. Okay, so here, because we're discussing lip, we'll talk about cleft lip, but also it can be associated with cleft palate, which will come later into the video. Okay, the types of cleft lip are central, which is a very rare occurrence. It's also called hair lip, and it's exactly in the central. Okay, so between the two median nasal processes, so it goes straight like this. Okay, and it's a very rare occurrence. The most commonest occurrence is of the lateral, on either on this side or this side, either unilateral or bilateral. So you can see in this photo on the left side that it shows unilateral cleft lip in a child, and also on the right side it shows a bilateral cleft lip. Okay, so you can get a good view of this and imagine how it looks like. Incomplete, it doesn't extend to the nose. Complete, it extends to the nose, to the nasal floor. Simple, the cleft in the lip only. And compound, cleft in the lip and alveolus. What is alveolus? Where the teeth are attached to the gum, the concavity where the teeth are attached, it's called alveolus. So it has gone into the alveolus too. Treatment of cleft lip is surgery. There's something called Millard criteria, rule of 10. Okay, so for a surgery to occur in a child, there should be certain there should be certain threshold that the child should have crossed in sense of weight, age, and hemoglobin count. The weight should be more than 10 pounds, the age should be more than 10 weeks old, and the hemoglobin should be more than 10 gram percentage. Okay. Some important points about the surgery. The cleft lip should be treated in 4 to 6 months. Millard cleft lip repair is done by rotating the local nasolabial flaps. So there in cleft lips and cleft palate surgery, there are usually flaps which are opened, and then they are sutured to treat the condition, rotating the local nasolabial flaps. Okay. Millard advancement flap is done, and it's done in unilateral cleft lip. For bilateral cleft lip repair, we have single or two stage. Okay, so either you treat both the cleft lips which are bilateral one by one, or at a single time. So single or two stage, you treat this one before, and then after that you treat this one. And if you're doing the two stage, there should be 6 months gap between the surgery of each. 3-layer repair. You repair the skin, you repair the muscle, you repair the mucosa. Okay. And what is the post-op care? During surgery and after surgery, there should be some good infection control. And when the child grows up, train them to properly swallow, suck, and speak, because those things will be hindered, because there is something wrong which happened. It was not a physiological phenomena, it was pathological. And when the child grows up and reaching the milestones, they have to you should make sure that they properly reach the milestones. Okay. The second topic is oral cavity, mucosa, and inner cheeks. Okay. Now, oral cavity is the first part of the digestive tube. So now we're coming to the main part. It extends from the lip to the oropharyngeal isthmus. Okay. It is divided into two parts, the vestibule and oral cavity proper. What is the vestibule? When you close your mouth, the teeth are closed, and then you still have some gap in front of the teeth, between the teeth and the lip. So that's the vestibule. It's a slit-like space between the lip or the cheeks, the mucosa, and the teeth or the gum. That's vestibule. It's a slit-like, there's very less space in the vestibule, and the big oral cavity proper, which comes out of the teeth, is the largest space. Okay. So when you close your mouth, you can see these two spaces. When you open your mouth, it's all about oral cavity proper. The vestibule, when mouth is open, as I said, it communicates freely with the oral cavity proper. But when the teeth are occluded, you can see that it communicates with the oral cavity via retromolar region. As the name suggests, a retromolar. So behind the molar teeth, there's a gap inside here. You can feel it, upper and lower, between the upper and lower teeth rows. You can see that there is a gap which goes and opens into the oral cavity via the vestibule. Lateral wall of the cheeks are governed, the mechanisms are governed by the buccinator muscle, the movement and all. Why I mentioned buccinator muscle? Because the tone of the buccinator muscle keeps the vestibule, teeth or gums in contact with each other. So if there is any injury to the nerve system, the nerve supplying the motor effects of the buccinator muscle, it can cause paralysis. So just like I've written here, the clinical aspect of this particular buccinator muscle is facial palsy, which can cause muscular paralysis. And the lips and the gum can fall away from the teeth, and there could be collection of food in the vestibule, because the lips are not able to push back the food, get collected in the vestibule. In the openings in the vestibule, these are some points worth mentioning. The parotid duct opens in the vestibule near the crown of the upper second molar. It also the opening of labial and buccal mucosal glands. 4 to 5 molar mucosal glands are also open on the buccopharyngeal fascia. Now coming to the oral cavity proper, the boundaries of the oral cavity proper anteriorly is very easy to understand, teeth and gum, when the teeth are occluded. Posterior, oropharyngeal isthmus. On the sides, palatoglossal arches. Somewhere here you will find the palatoglossal arches. The roof is made by the palate. We'll come to that later. The floor of the mouth is made up of anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Okay, the tongue which is visible properly is the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. In this diagram, you can also see properly there is some uvula made. There is palatoglossal arch. There's the tongue and the posterior wall of pharynx. Not the discussion matter of this topic, but it's good that you see it here. Floor of mouth, it's somewhat horseshoe-shaped region, and it is sandwiched between the anterior 2/3 of the tongue and the muscular diaphragm. If you touch your tongue with the base of your oral cavity, you will feel that there is a muscular diaphragm, a film, which is formed by two mylohyoid muscles. Okay, so the floor of mouth is sandwiched between them. Okay. Surface of the floor is formed by the mucous membrane, very easy to understand. And the anterior part of the floor, it has sublingual region. Okay, near here it has a sublingual region. It has a clinical importance. It has there are some features of sublingual region. Frenulum linguae. What is frenulum linguae? When the tongue is elevated, you can see there's a fold which connects the tongue with the floor of the mouth. That's a very important structure. That's called frenulum linguae. Okay, it's a median fold of mucous membrane where lower surface of the tongue is connected to the floor. Sublingual papilla. It's on the either side of the end of the frenulum. Okay, and it opens and it has the opening for the submandibular duct. Okay, sublingual fold. Sublingual glands project in it and cause elevation here. It has openings for sublingual ducts, as the name suggests. We're talking about the floor of the mouth and sublingual region. You can imagine as the point goes. The clinical aspects. The clinical aspects, as I said, sublingual region, it shows Ludwig's angina. What is Ludwig's angina? It's basically cellulitis of the floor of mouth due to some infection. There's inflammation of the floor of the mouth. There's swelling because of the inflammation, and the swelling, if grows more, it reaches the submandibular, the submental region. And because it is coming from from below, it will push the tongue up and can cause difficulty of swallowing because you cannot push the tongue down. There's something there restricting it. Aphthous ulcers or canker sores in common term. It's a superficial ulcer. It's recurrent and very painful. It could be single or multiple. It's usually hyperemic. It appears red in color. Covered by thin exudate and narrow erythematic rim. So you can see that if it's whitish in color, you can see a red ring around it. Associated with celiac disease, Behcet disease, and inflammatory bowel disease. So these are some systematic diseases with which aphthous ulcers are connected or associated. It usually revolves spontaneously in 7 to 10 days in normal patients, but I've written normal patients because in immunocompromised patients, it takes more time. It could be recurrent also. Oral candidiasis, everybody has heard about oral candidiasis, especially in this time with white fungus. It's also called oral thrush. It is due to Candida albicans, and usually because Candida albicans is it's a normal part of it's a normal flora of our body. Only in immunocompromised patient can it show infection. It has 3 clinical forms of oral candidiasis: pseudomembranous, which is the most common, erythematous, and hyperplastic. So the pseudomembranous is the one which is gray to white in color, inflammatory membrane, and in it is enmeshed the fibrinosuppurative exudates. Okay, so it looks very dirty white kind of a thing, in which also there is the oral candidiasis in this exudate, and in this the mesh which is created because of the pseudomembranous, the gray white mesh. It also contains the causative organism along with the fibrinosuppurative exudate. What is fibrino? There could be some fibrin substances along with pus formation because there's suppuration. So it forms a very dirty white layer. The treatment is broad spectrum antibiotics. Fibrous proliferative lesions. So the first thing which comes in fibrous proliferative lesions is traumatic fibroma. What is traumatic fibroma? Because there is continuous chronic disturbance or irritation at the gum, at the cheek, the patient could be getting traumatic fibroma. It's a submucosal nodular mass which comes out because of the disturbance. It is made up of fibrous connective tissue stroma. Okay. It is caused due to nutritive trauma, as I said. The treatment is usually surgical excision and removal. Peripheral giant cell granuloma. What is that? It's reactive or inflammatory in nature. The aggregation of multinucleate foreign body-like giant cells separated by fibroangiomatous trauma. Okay, so what do we understand here? That there is aggregation of because we're talking about giant cell, there is aggregation of multinucleate foreign body-like substance of giant cells separated by a fibroangiomatous trauma. Okay, fibroangiomatous. So it looks red in color, and it's separated. The giant cell is separated by the fibroangiomatous stroma. The treatment is surgical excision. What is ranula? You may have heard about ranula. It's an extravasation cyst arising from the sublingual gland and occasionally from the submandibular gland also. Actually, it's a pseudocyst and it contains saliva in it. Okay, it is bluish in color. It's smooth. It's very soft. It's fluctuant, moves, and doesn't stay very firm. And it's usually in the lateral aspect of the floor of mouth. Okay, investigation could be ultrasound of neck or MRI of neck, and oral and with that the oral cavity diagnosis. Okay, the treatment is excision of the ranula or the salivary gland which is causing the ranula, or marsupialization. Marsupialization basically means that you're making a pocket just like marsupials have and then removing the content from it. Okay, I won't go deep into marsupialization because this is an integrated part and we are discussing a lot of aspects. We cannot go in detail of every aspect. Okay, so I'll just name the surgeries and some important points. Okay, as we move further. Sublingual dermoids. It's sequestration dermoids lined by squamous epithelium. Smooth, soft, fluctuant, and non-transilluminant. Okay. It occasionally causes trismus, dysphagia, pain, or dynophagia. So there is, because of the dermoid, this obstruction, it can cause trismus, dysphagia, pain, or dynophagia. Investigation is MRI. The treatment is excision. Okay. And if there is a small dermoid, it can be excised, but if it can be excised through intraoral approach, we can go inside the oral cavity and treat on it. But if it's a large cyst, we need external approach from the outside. Stomatitis. Stomatitis is inflammation of the oral mucosa. What are its type? Traumatic. Traumatic due to dentures, teeth bite, brushing harshly. The treatment is proper mouthwash. Okay. Aphthous type of stomatitis. It is due to malnutrition, debility, steroid use. Okay. There could be multiple hyperemic, painful vesicles. Okay. Later they form ulcers. The treatment is antibiotic, vitamin B and C, and levamisole. The third is Candida stomatitis. It's a fungal infection, and the treatment is fluconazole. There's something called Vincent's ulcerative stomatitis. It occurs due to gram-negative anaerobic bacteria, Borrelia vincenti or fusiform. And the treatment is antibiotics, penicillin group antibiotics. Okay, pre-malignant lesions. These are very important lesions, which are particularly very important for the third year students and also for the second year students. Leukoplakia. It's a white patch in mucosa of the oral cavity. As you can see in the diagram, there's some white patchy, which is it's a very stubborn patch which doesn't get removed so easily. In the oral cavity, it can occur anywhere in the oral cavity. It can occur in the tongue, around the oral mucosa, anywhere. The causes are usually smoking, tobacco chewing. There's some sepsis. Superficial glossitis, the inflammation of the tongue. Syphilis, eating of too much spices can cause irritation, because spices are basically, if you enjoy spices because there is pain sensation on your tongue, so continued trauma to the tongue can also cause leukoplakia. Types are homologous, nodular, speckled. There's something called hairy leukoplakia. It's a very dense, pigmented, friable lesion. It commonly occurs in the tongue. And it's wrongly said hairy. It doesn't have any hair on it. The investigation is usually biopsy because it's a pre-malignant lesion. So we're coming towards the biopsy thing. Tissue study for P53 mutation by the biopsy study. DNA aneuploidy and expression of oncogenes can be done by the biopsy study. The treatment is removal of the underlying cause very naturally. Surgical excision and CO2 laser excision can also be done. Oral submucosal fibrosis. Okay, It's a progressive fibrosis deep to mucosa of the oral cavity. It causes trismus and ankylosing because of the irritation it can cause inflammation and then trismus and ankylosing. It has a very mottled marble paler uh, appearance in the affected mucosa. The etiology is hypersensitivity to chili, betel nut, vitamin deficiency. Okay, and some of the cases can turn into malignancy. There's a long list of treatment. I won't go deep into it, but there's removal of the causative factors, maintaining the oral hygiene. We can give dexamethasone injection 4 mg with Hyalase 1500 units. The lack of vitamin can be fulfilled by giving them vitamin and iron supplements. Chewable hydrocortisone tablets. Surgical excision can be done. We can do multiple release excision with Z-shaped plasties on the tongue flap coverage. Okay? And the last is stem cell therapy. You can do stem cell therapy also. Cancerous lesions. Carcinoma of gingivo-buccal complex. The gingivo-buccal complex. Squamous cell carcinoma. Okay, the most common occurrence of the carcinoma in the form of this carcinoma is squamous cell carcinoma. It involves the buccal mucosa and gingiva. It's often called the Indian oral cancer because it occurs mostly in the people who chew tobacco, and most of the people who chew tobacco, the population in Indians is quite high, and the treatment, that's why it's called Indian oral cancer. The treatment is marginal mandibulectomy or segmental resection. Okay, you can also give radiotherapy and chemotherapy. So the removal of the cause, the removal of that particular gland which gives origin to the carcinoma, mandibulectomy or segmental resection. Along with that, we can give radiotherapy and chemotherapy as well. Carcinoma of the cheek. Okay, so it also commonly presents as squamous cell carcinoma. The clinical features are ulcer, pain, halitosis, trismus, and dysphagia. The investigation we can do is wedge biopsy. Uh, we can do FNAC. We can do CT scan. We can do MRI. We can do something called orthopantomogram. Okay, so this term orthopantomogram will come frequently in the later slides. The treatment is radiotherapy, uh, curative or palliative, chemotherapy, surgery, wide excision, or a hemimandibulectomy. Okay, so half removal of the half. It's hemi, so it's not exactly mandibulectomy. It's hemimandibulectomy. Thank you.